Utah is the pick to win the Big 12, but how do they grade out at each position individually amongst their new conference peers? That's what we're going to be diving into on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports just simply stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You visit FanDuel.com to get started today. My name is J2 Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to have college football expert Max Chadwick of PFF on today's show. And Max, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into a positional breakdown of all of the positions in the Big 12. For all of you guys who've been tuned in all week, I hope you've enjoyed the media coverage, but I want to turn our attention to a lot of the on-the-field stuff with Utah as Phil Steele, has released his positional rankings throughout the Big 12, and they're very interesting. He's got every single unit ranked, and there's some ties and everything worked in between. So we're going to start and go position by position, breaking it all down, and close today's show with Max's big take on Utah football for this coming season. So let's start with the quarterbacks. That's where the rage is always about in Phil Steele's rankings, which he does his preview every year, as we mentioned. He has Utah as the second best quarterback spot. He has Shedeur Sanders, number one for Colorado. He has Cam Rising, number two. This is extremely fair, I think, and I'll actually be honest. I didn't expect to disagree with Phil. I might even have him third because I think Noah Fifita is that good that I actually might have Fifita second and Cam Rising third because of the injuries and all that stuff too. But I know there's a lot of young excitement around an Avery Johnson, but I do think Cam deserves to be ahead of him. I think Cam belongs in the top three. Like I said, for me, as we're recording this on July 8th, like that's where Cam to me falls at third because of Fifita and Shedeur Sanders, just what they can do. Their overall talent, I think, is a little higher, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cam even ended up as number one on this list by the time it closes out, Max.
Yeah, I actually put him even lower than third. I'm looking at this right now. I put Garrett Green from West Virginia. I really am a huge fan of. He's a guy that I think is being criminally slept on because of one stat, and that's his completion percentage. But what people don't understand about Garrett Green is he only throws the ball downfield, basically. And he's a really good downfield thrower. But anytime you throw the ball downfield, obviously you have a less likely chance of completing than, say, a screen pass, right? So I think that is a really misused stat with Garrett Green. I really think he's a lot better than the completion percentage might tell you. And also, he ran for 800 yards last year for West Virginia, too. So I think he's the most slept-on quarterback in college football, and then goes into this list as well. I think he's still slept on in this list. He's got number 4, so it's not too bad. But, I put Shedeur number 1 for sure. I even think about Green too. I think Green and Noah Fifita are almost like tied for second and third. And then I'd probably put Cam at 4 after that, I'd probably say. So I think 4 is probably fair for Cam Rising, but I would personally put Garrett Green and Fifita and Shedeur Sanders above him right now.
I think it's absolutely fair. But I also want to ask you this, just talk about Cam Rising. Is he at 4 for you because there's concerns coming off the injury? Or is there something else with Cam Rising that you think, okay, like yourself in the top 4, that's still really good, but is there another thing that he does specifically that separates him from the other guys here?
I think the injury does play a part in it. Now, if he played a full season last year and was really, really good, then he might be below him. But I honestly think it had more to do with Garrett Green really having a huge breakout year for us. I think he had like a 90-plus grade last year. Obviously, Fifita had a major breakout as well. Looked unbelievable as a redshirt freshman last year. And I think he's going to remain the same this year. And then obviously Shedeur Sanders, made the transition from the FCS to FBS a lot better than even I anticipated, right? And he's a guy that proved that, hey, I'm still an elite quarterback no matter what level I play at. So I think those 3 guys really having huge years last year while Cam sat on the bench with his injury, that was the reason why they jumped above him. I don't really think the injury played too much of a part for me, at least. I just think those 3 kind of showed a next level that I don't know if Cam has hit that level or he's been close to that level. But again, the injury does play a part in it. I just think those 3 I'd probably take over him as of right now, but it is close for sure.
Yeah, and we're looking at these when you look at Green versus Cam. Cam has led Utah to those Pac-12 championships, but like you said, did happen 2 years ago. Cam, when he was last healthy, threw for more yards than Green, but Green does offer that dual threat ability. Cam has never touched 800 yards rushing, so that's where Green's got him there. So I do think that's a very, very fair debate, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how both those guys end up living up to the hype. So that's how we feel about the quarterbacks. Let's move on to running backs. Utah is ranked 4th in the running back department. I think that's fair because they don't have a guy, right? When you look at Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon being the guy, RJ Harvey at UCF, over 1,000 yards. Devin Neal will become the program's all-time leading rusher at Kansas. So then Utah's at 4. They're tied with a Cincinnati and a West Virginia and a Texas Tech all in there too, where kind of that next batch of teams. I think when you're talking about Utah, you're talking about Anthony Woods coming over from Idaho after having 1,000 yards, right? Mekhi Bernard has been at Utah forever and consistently made plays for them. Jalen Glover is a really strong second to third back for this team, as well as some of the higher recruits that have kind of been waitings in the wing. I feel like the depth of Utah's running back room is what's going to propel them. And I think tied at 4th with all these teams with so many strong candidates, but not a guy per se, is a fair ranking.
I don't want you to kick me off your show, man. I think this is high again for Utah. I don't really. This is the best conference in America for running backs, and like you said, Utah doesn't really have a clear guy, and there's a lot of schools that do. So like Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon's the best running back in America, understandable. I think West Virginia should be higher than that. I think they're not. I think they're way better at running back than Utah is right now. They got 2 guys that I think are studs, and Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson. So I put them above. I think Arizona criminally underrated here at 8. I think Arizona with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt coming in was a really, really good running back in New Mexico last year. They should be a lot higher than 8. Texas Tech has a top 5 running back in the country, and Taj Brooks. Like, that's way better than anything Utah has as well. I think UCF should be number 1, honestly. If you talk about unit over player, I put UCF number 1 because I think UCF's unit of Penny Boone and RJ Harvey and all the other guys they got there is better than just one Ollie Gordon. But yeah, this is a little interesting. I think Phil is giving Utah a lot of credit here for some. I'm looking at some of these right now. I think there's some here that I think Utah's a little bit overrated in. I think there's some that are underrated in too. But 4 for running back in this conference. I don't know about that, man. This is the best conference in America for running backs by a mile. Kansas State at 8 is crazy to me. I think they should be way higher than that. They got DJ Giddens, who's a top 10 running back in the country. They just got the Colorado kid Dylan Edwards coming in as well, who's really, really good, true sophomore. So yeah, I think this is a kind of a disrespectful for some schools out here, but Phil's obviously great at what he does. But I don't know about Utah number 4 for this.
That's it's fair. As much as like I said, I put Utah where I did, but you can't argue with the proven production of a lot of those guys, and even Anthony Woods. Like, it's still a transition. We have to see if he can do it there. So I think it's fair that you would side with some of those guys with the more proven commodities, because a lot of what I'm arguing for Utah is depth and potential versus a lot of guys who have done it at their schools already, or in Arizona's case, like, we just expect that to flourish really well. So I totally get you there as well too. So that's how we feel about the running back state. Let's really quick before we get into tight end. I think there's not a tight end in this ranking. I think Brant Kuithe's the best tight end in the Big 12. Do you push back on that?
No, I think that's pretty fair. The only ones I put above him, I think my ranking, were Colston Loveland from Michigan and Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. I think those are the only 2 I put above Brant Kuithe right now. I think he's pretty clearly the best tight end in the Big 12. In fact, I don't even know if I had another tight end in my top 10 from the Big 12. Actually, Jalen Conyers, who's now at Texas Tech, transferring in there from Arizona State. He's the only other Big 12 tight end I had at number 9. So, I think Brant Kuithe is pretty easily the best tight end in the conference.
See, there you go. Now I'm not going to kick you off the show.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. Yeah.
And we're not even done with offense yet. We got to talk about these receivers, the offensive line, and still get to the defense on top of so many other things on today's Locked On Utes. Max is going to stay with us, but we first have to take a brief break to tell you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our great friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. You keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Max, coming back in here, looking now at where we feel Utah is sitting in this strong position where let's move on to their wide receiver rankings. And for the wide receiver spot, Utah is listed as third. They're tied with a couple of teams in a UCF and Arizona too. And when you're looking at this, Colorado clearly has the best. TCU's duo is fine, but they only combined for in Williamson and Richardson, but they only combined for just over 1,000 yards, the main duo for them. So that's not as impressive to me for them being there. And look, I know they added Eric McAllister from Boise State, so we'll see how he does too. And look, Arizona, when we talk about McMillan, obviously he's a monster. Utah can't compete with him, but that's where some of the depth of the guys Utah's added with a Damian Alford coming over from Stanford, right? The potential and the things that he could maybe do for Utah. That's where I like his inclusion and this that he's factoring into these rankings for the Utes, I feel like. And UCF's got some quality guys as well too. But I think Utah, they're tied with third. So I think in the top 5, with the added depth they kind of have in this receiver room. I know in the past we would probably say they should be outside the top 10, but especially with the addition of Dorian Singer, who I do think is going to be one of the better receivers in this conference, I think you can make the case for Utah being in the top 5.
Yeah, I think definitely. I don't hate this at all. And I think a part of it is because I think the conference is, I mentioned before, I was just incredibly strong at running back. I think it's really weak at receiver in terms of the depth as well. So I don't hate this at all. I think Dorian Singer is a guy that is going to have a bounce back year. He really was very disappointing last year at USC, was just not utilized nearly. I had him as a top 10 receiver entering the country entering the year, and he just was like the number 4 option for them at times last year. So very surprising as how little he was used for USC at times last year. But I think he will bounce back in Utah in a hopefully a better environment for him to succeed, not get lost in the shuffle. I like Micah Pittman. I like Money Parks as well. So yeah, I think this is fine. I think Colorado is easily number 1. I think they're the only receiving core I had in the Big 12 in my top 10 overall ranking, so I don't hate that at all. And I think, like I said, I think Kansas has an argument to be higher. They had a really productive receiving core, even though there wasn't a true star, and they brought back a lot of their top guys. So I think they should be higher than number 7, for example, in that Utah range. But yeah, I can't hate this too much because, like I said, there really isn't. Like Utah's receiving core does not blow me away at all, besides Brant Kuithe, of course. But at the same time, like everyone else in the Big 12 doesn't really blow me away at all either. So I think putting him third is not terrible for this list.
Yeah, you're right. It's more of a run-heavy conference, which is where the offensive line is such a big thing that comes into play. So moving on to the offensive line rankings, he has the Utah's offensive line at 4th, going along with Iowa State too. The ones that are above them, look, Oklahoma State is the best, and I can get behind Cincinnati and West Virginia because they do have a lot of returners too. And Utah does have some guys they're replacing along the offensive line. But the truth is, even when Utah's offensive line hasn't been great, like last year they weren't great, they're still really good. And I do think they will, when it's all said and done, be one of the top 5 offensive lines this year in the Big 12 because that's what they always were in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think I'm looking right at my O-line rankings. I had Oklahoma State above them. I think that's fair. I think, and I don't necessarily love Oklahoma State's O-line. I know they brought back all 5 starters, but all 5 of them were like, okay, like good solid players. They weren't superstars. It's like that to me. Like
that's a good point. Is we do this a lot when they return a starter and we don't take the steps and say, well, is a good Utah's an offensive lineman like that. Michael Mokafisi, he's very up and down. Like we hope he improves this year, but just because he's coming back, that's not a guarantee. So I like that you raised that.
No, exactly, and I think the one thing that I'll hold back, and I haven't ranked every offensive line like Phil has in this, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm going to do these rankings right now quickly. But the one thing that does hold me back in what I wrote about in Utah's preview that you can find hopefully pretty soon on pff.com is that the pass blocking, I think, is by far the biggest weakness of this team right now. Last year, they had the 5th worst pass blocking grade in the country. They had a 46 pass blocking grade. So that scares me. Now, they were 43rd, I think, in run blocking grade. So that's solid. But the pass protection last year was quite simply a disaster. So I think for Phil to be saying, oh, this is a really good offensive line, it's like, okay, as a run blocking unit, sure. But as a pass protection unit, this was quite literally one of the worst in college football last year. So that to me scares me a little bit. And maybe I have them a little bit lower than 4 just because the pass blocking last year was so bad. And they must replace 3 starters on the offensive line as well. And they didn't really add too much in the portal to really fix that. So that to me scares me a little bit. And I think for me to say, the offensive line is going to be a huge strength of the team, I don't know. I'm not blown away by the offensive lines in the Big 12 anyway, so maybe 4 is fair for them. But only the caveat I'll say is that the offensive line pass protection wise has to get a lot better. Otherwise, it could be a pretty long year, and especially for a guy like Cam Rising coming off an injury. That scares me a little bit with how bad that unit was last year.
I think that's absolutely fair. They did have their lumps, especially look at like a freshman left tackle over there in Spencer Fano. The left tackle spot was a big issue. Caleb Loma will be starting for the first time. How is that going to get sorted out? And Utah did it. I didn't know they were that. I did not know they graded out that badly. So that is interesting to hear that they ended up grading out that poorly, because it just kind of felt like, it was a combination. The Utah passing offense last year, whether it was the pass protection, Bryson Barnes at times also having his issue. It regressed in a big way from 22. And it'll be interesting to see if they can get back to that 2024 form with Cam Rising. So that's the offensive side. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball now. So let's look at this Utah defensive line. They are the clear-cut number one in the Big 12. I think this defensive line, even though they lost Jonah Ellis, is stacked. Connor O'Toole was the guy who was supposed to be this team's best pass rusher last year. And once he got back, he still had, I think he finished with 3-4 sacks, showed a lot of promise still. Logan Fano, who we expect to be back from his injury, he was on a tear once he got his legs under him and really going. Van Fillinger's been there forever. Junior Chafuna's a monster of a defensive tackle, especially when it comes to being a elite run stuffing defensive tackle. Keanu Tano Vaso evolved a lot over the year. Samote Pepa battled injuries, but if they get 2022 Samote Pepa back, that'll be big. Aliki by Mahi, David Fotu. I just feel like this is a very good Utah defensive line. They have pretty much everyone back except for Ellis from that top 5 rushing defense a year ago. And I expect that run defense to be really good again, and a large part obviously being the defensive line up front.
Yeah, I can't hate this ranking at all. I didn't have any top Big 12 defensive line in my top 10 ranking, so I couldn't tell you exactly where I'd rank everyone else. But I think Utah is certainly a fair number one for this. So I'm trying to think of right now of any other schools that I even put in that mix. Surprisingly, this might surprise a lot of people when I say this. I think Colorado's defensive line is going to be a lot better this year. They got a lot of portal guys coming in that I think are going to be huge impact guys, like BJ Green coming in from Arizona State. But I would not put them number one above Utah right now. So I think Utah, here at number one is certainly fair.
Well, let's move on to the linebackers then, because we mentioned the front seven and the success that Utah had a year ago. Linebacker-wise, he has Utah at third. Look, obviously, you're going to go with Martin and Daniels at Oklahoma State as the top guys. They had nearly 250 combined tackles, so they earned the top spot. But I was looking at TCU, and there's some good guys there too. And Iowa State, who Utah's tied with, they got some solid guys as well. But I just feel like assuming Lander Barton stays healthy, because I know he got hurt last year, but man, I just feel like Lander Barton to me is going to be a guy who goes to the NFL after this year. I think he's going to have a monster season. Karene Reed has been so steady and consistent for Utah too. Those two guys and their ability just not to miss tackles is a large part of the reason that run defense last year was so stout. I do believe this is a top 2 linebacker core in the Big 12. If you want to say the depth, because they did lose Leavani Damuni, their third guy, I understand that a little bit, but I do think Reed and Barton will be one of the top linebacker duos in the Big 12.
Yeah, I put them too. I agree. This is the first time I feel like I'm actually agreeing that they should be higher than not lower. I know a lot of your listeners probably hate me right now for how much I've been poo-pooing on Utah here. I really do like Utah as a team overall. Don't get me wrong. I just think that some of the stuff here is a little overrated. But I think the linebacker unit I put 2. I think I agree with Phil that Oklahoma State would be number 1 for me. I think a guy that you even mentioned, Colin Oliver, is technically a linebacker now for them, and he's their best defensive player by far, in my opinion. So he's kind of a hybrid between edge and linebacker. He actually played edge for most of his career. They actually moved to linebacker last year. He still rushes the passer a lot. He's an elite pass rusher. I think he's a top 10 linebacker in the country. You mentioned Nicholas Martin coming back as well. Bring back him as well as another starter. So I put Oklahoma State 1, but in my linebacker ranking, my top 10 units, I had Utah number 11. I think I put them right behind Oklahoma State, and I think there's a couple other schools you could put in there in the mix as well. Like Arizona, I think actually has a pretty good unit that I think they got a little bit underrated here, and I think Arizona's probably the most underrated team in the entire conference right now. I think Utah should have been number 2 on this list for sure. And I wouldn't put schools like TCU above them, or even Iowa State tied with them. I like Caleb Bacon for Iowa State, but I think the combination of Barton and Reed for Utah is too good to not be at least number 2.
Utah is quite the combination they have to replace in their secondary. They lost both Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki. But Utah always seems to do a good job recruiting and developing defensive backs. And Teo Johnson feels like a guy who's poised for a breakout year. Zamiah Vaughn's back as a top corner. You get Keenan Johnson transfers over from Georgia Tech is another addition for them. You get a nice recruit in Smith Snowden and another unknown like Jonathan Hall, Nate Ritchie, Alakai Gilman. Who is the other guy going to be? there's a lot of things up in the air for the secondary. So I understand the ranking of 4th, but man, this is a Utah team that I just feel like they always rise up to that level, especially Zamiah Vaughn being back. I think is huge for this team. And I always say on the show, and Morgan Scalley and Sharif Shaw, I trust because I think those guys do a great job. It's the reason that the Utah defensive backs always are so stout and hard to get past. So I do think by the end of the year, this will end up being a top 3 secondary, but I can also sit here and say most of that is on gut feeling potential. And I definitely can understand their ranking at 4, and they're even tied with other teams at 4, which I think is fair.
Yeah. Which is, Phil, I love Phil, man, but this ranking is a little all over the place for me. I think Utah's even behind 4, and I don't even think the schools ahead of them are the schools I would even put ahead of them. I think Arizona, I put Arizona number 1 in the conference. I think Arizona got Tacario Davis, who's going to be a top 15 pick in the draft next year. Their corner is one of the best corners we have in the country right now. Traden Stukes is their slot corner. He's a really, really good slot corner. Gunnar Maldonado, returning starter at safety, really, really good safety. Dalton Johnson, another returning starter at safety. He's a solid player as well. So I put that number 1. I put Colorado number 2. Colorado's got Travis Hunter as number 1 as the top corner. He's a top 5 corner in the country. DJ McKinney transferring in from Oklahoma State. He's a really, really solid corner. Preston Hodge, one of the most underrated transfers we had this offseason, coming in from Liberty. He had a 90 grade last year for Liberty. He's their slot corner. He's going to be really good for them. Shiloh Sanders, he's not as hyped up as his brother, but he's still a really solid safety as well. And they brought back the other safety too. So I put that number 2. I put Kansas number 3. I think the combination of Kobe Bryant and Melo Dotson might be the best combo of corners that we have in the Big 12 right now in terms of outside corners. They bring back OJ Burrows at safety, who's a solid player. They bring back Marvin Grant, who's a really, really good player at safety as well. So I put Kansas number 3. Who was the other school I had right here? And I put Iowa State above them. I think Iowa State is a good secondary. I think they were number 1 on Phil's list, right? Or number 2 on his list for secondary. Miles Purchase is really good. They got some other really solid players in that secondary as well. Jeremiah Cooper's good. Malik Verdon's good. Bo Fryler's a good player too. So, I put them above them. And then I even put Baylor above Utah. I think Baylor, they had some really, really good true freshmen last year, and Caden Jenkins and Carl Williams the 4th. They're both coming back for another year. They were really, really good as true freshmen last year. So I think that combination of those two is huge for that defense. I think I put a few schools above Utah, not the ones that Phil had here. So I think it's an interesting ranking from Phil, especially like Baylor at number 11. I really don't agree with that. Colorado at 8. I don't know how. Travis Hunter alone, it could be like Travis Hunter and 4 of me out there, and I still put him higher than number 8, right? So, it's interesting. I love, again, I don't mean to hate on Phil too much, but I love because I love him and I love what he does. But some of these rankings here, I'm just a little funky to me. It looks like.
Yeah, this is what it's fun to talk about this stuff, right? Like we're just having normal, no one's taking shots. It's just normal disagreements. And even you bring up things like, I think because of the history of Utah defensive backs that they're going to do a good job this year. And I think they're going to have a good season, but you also raise a very good point about, hey, these schools have had these guys in the program kind of stayed there, have had some success too, versus I am relying on some of that history and the tradition that Utah has. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that kind of ends up shaking out this fall for Utah. So we've gone through all the positions now, and I'm excited, Max, to ask you about some. You've talked about each position now for Utah, but you haven't given your thoughts yet on this overall Utah team. So I'm going to be asking you about that in one moment. But first, I want to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of our episode of Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we just get fewer and fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So you can head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. All-Star break is gearing up here. And look, once it's over, we're getting even closer to the postseason. We even got NFL getting ready. So if you guys want to dip your toe in some betting action with some MLB baseball and then really lock in with the NFL, NBA, college football, whatever you may enjoy betting on, FanDuel is your place. So you can head over to FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Visit FanDuel.com to look at all the odds today. All right, Max, coming in to close this one out. I asked you before the show, I wanted a bold take on Utah this coming season. What is that bold take that you've now had 24 minutes to craft?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a really bold one I could give you right now. Utah is the betting favorite, right, to win the Big 12 next year. Is that correct?
Correct, and they were picked by the Big 12 media.
Okay, I don't agree with that. I think your viewers are going to hate me. I think Utah's a really, really good team. I like them a lot. I still think they're a top, probably second best team in the conference. I think there's one school, and it's not really even a Utah bold take. I just want to get out a bold take in general. This one team is 7th in Big 12 odds. I would put them number 1, and that is Arizona. I have no earthly idea how Arizona is plus 1,700. They have a 7.5 win total. It would be quite literally a catastrophic season if they go 7-5 next year. So if you're a betting man, hammer the over for 7.5. I have no idea what that schedule they have, how 7.5 is aligned for that team. I would set it at 9.5, and I even debate taking the over at 9.5. So Arizona is my pick to win the conference next year. I think Utah's going to be a really solid team. I think 9.5 is a little high for their win total right now. I love Kyle Whittingham. I love the coaching staff there. I do agree they have the best coaching staff in the country, which is, I believe, what Phil ranked them as, or in the conference, I should say. But I don't think Utah's going to win the Big 12 next year, even though I love Cam Rising and Brant Keithy. There's just some other holes in that roster. I know they're going to do a great job of covering up those holes, but I don't know. I think they're a really good team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they play in the Big 12 title game and maybe even make the playoffs still. Maybe we get 2 Big 12 teams to make the playoff. But I think that Arizona is going to ultimately win the conference next year, and right now they are not at all being talked about as one of the top contenders to win it.
They aren't, but to your point, they have one of the best quarterbacks. They have one of the best receivers, and they have done a good job filling in some other spots. That would be quite the swing of things. Jed Fish leaves, and they still end up winning the conference, but it's definitely possible, and I think they got the squad and the quarterback to potentially do it. I like it, Max. It's going to be fun to see if Arizona's got a tough one because they have to go to Utah, but we'll be interested to see how those Utah holes that we kind of talked about on the show, even where I'm banking on the coaching staff. How is that transition going to go? It's going to be a lot of fun to sort out, and there is just a lot of stuff to still sort out before the college football season gets started, Max. So if people want more of your content, where should they head over to?
Yeah, I'm not sure your viewers are going to want more of my content after all the stuff I've been saying about Utah. Again, I really do like them a lot this year. I still think this is a top 15 to 20 team in college football. Don't get me wrong.
You said they could still. Really quick to defend you. You said you're picking Arizona, but you also said you could see Utah still getting in the college football playoff, which would still be an incredibly.
I can see them
very high praise for them.
Exactly. I can still see them winning the conference. I think this conference is wide open. Like there's like 7 or 8 teams I could legit see making a run to the conference title next year. So that's why I think this is a wide open conference. So even though I'm picking Arizona, I'm not fully confident that they're going to do it, right? So I think, if you want to follow my work, though, I host the PFF College Football Show, which you can find on YouTube. We're actually putting out previews for every single Power 5 team right now. So I'm very excited about that. And you can find it on YouTube, and also all the articles over at pff.com. If you want to follow me on X, it's at Max Chadwick CFB as well.
Max, thank you so much for joining us. Great stuff.
Thanks, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Hope you all enjoyed Media Day this week. It's been a fun week, and the season is getting even closer. Can't wait to be back with you all next week to break it all down. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend.